This was tragic for both families. This is something that you don't normally deal with and see in this community.
I can see those children crying and weeping and screaming every day because they've done something this foolish. Reality has kicked in. People, please, train up your children.
For over a week, everyone believed this family died in a single, sudden moment on a Sunday morning. They were wrong. New court documents just revealed that one of these 5 family members was already dead days before anyone realized anything was happening at all. Her body hidden in a place no one thought to look. This is the East St. Louis mass shooting, and what we've learned changes almost everything we thought we knew about how this happened. Welcome back to Crime Lab Report. New court documents have completely changed the timeline of what actually happened, and there are details in this update that are genuinely hard to process. If you're new here, this is where we break down real cases with the facts as they develop. So make sure you're subscribed, because this case isn't over. Let's get into what we now know. When this story first broke, it looked like everything happened in a single day, a Sunday morning that turned into a nightmare across 3 locations in East St. Louis. That's not what happened. Court documents filed this week reveal the killings actually stretched across more than a week. One of the murders, according to charging documents, took place between July 5th and July 7th, days before the public even knew anything was wrong. That means while investigators, neighbors, and even some family members believed this was a single, sudden eruption of violence, someone in this family may have already been dead for days. That first victim was Sherry May, 49 years old, and the way her body was discovered is one of the most disturbing details to come out of this entire case. Sherry wasn't found in a home, or at a park, or anywhere out in the open. She was found stuffed inside a storage tote, discarded in a dumpster at a residential complex called Godfrey Homes. Let that sink in. A woman's body, hidden inside a plastic tote, thrown away like trash. According to prosecutors in court, Sherry was shot at least 4 times by one of the suspects, 16-year-old Jaimir Davis. But she wasn't only shot. The state's attorney told the court that the second suspect, a 15-year-old girl referred to in court documents only as WT, because of her age, both shot and stabbed Sherry an unspecified number of times. 2 attackers, 2 different weapons, 1 victim, killed days before anyone realized what was happening. And here's the detail that adds an entirely new layer to this case. Sherry May was WT's aunt. This is no longer just a family targeted by 2 teenagers with an unclear connection. This is a 15-year-old girl allegedly shooting and stabbing her own aunt and then helping to hide her body in a dumpster days before her grandmother, her mother, her brother, and 2 more relatives were killed in what the public was told was a single, sudden mass shooting. So now we have to ask, if this started with Sherry days earlier in private, away from any witnesses, what happened in between? What led from that moment alone with her aunt to the events of that Sunday when 4 more people would end up dead and 2 more critically injured? That's exactly what we're going to break down next, including the 2 teenagers now formally charged, the 12-count one of them is facing, and a legal defense strategy that could completely change how this case is understood in court. Stick around, because it only gets more complicated from here. Let's talk about who's actually been charged, because the charges themselves tell you just how serious prosecutors believe this case is. Jaimir Davis, 16 years old, is now facing 12 separate counts. 5 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for each victim. 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, tied to the 2 survivors still recovering from their injuries. 2 counts of aggravated battery. 1 count of aggravated vehicular hijacking. 1 count of unlawful use of a stolen firearm. And then the count that's disturbed people more than almost anything else in this case, 1 count of dismembering a human body. 12 counts for a 16-year-old. And because of his age, Davis wasn't sent through juvenile court at all. Under Illinois law, there's something called an excluded jurisdiction provision. If a defendant is 16 or older at the time of a first-degree murder, the case automatically bypasses juvenile court completely and goes straight into the adult criminal system. No hearing required. No request needed. At 16, Davis crossed that line automatically, which means from the moment he was charged, he was already facing the adult system with all the consequences that come with it. The 15-year-old girl, WT, is in a different legal position. Because she's 15, she doesn't meet that automatic threshold. Right now, she's facing a juvenile delinquency petition, which does include first-degree murder charges. But the case hasn't automatically moved to adult court the way Davis's has. Instead, the St. Clair County State's Attorney's Office has to formally ask the court to transfer her case out of the juvenile system. That request is exactly what prosecutors have made. They're asking the court to try her as an adult, which means in the coming weeks, a judge is going to have to decide whether a 15-year-old accused of killing 5 family members, including her own aunt, should face the same consequences an adult would. Now, let's talk about what happened in the courtroom this week, because Davis made his first appearance, and it revealed something that could reshape how this entire case gets understood. He walked in handcuffed, described by those in the courtroom as looking solemn. He was remanded, meaning he'll remain in custody at the St. Clair County Jail while this case moves forward. But it's what his defense attorney said that's the real headline here. The attorney indicated an intent to file 3 separate legal notices: a notice of self-defense, a notice of compulsion, and a notice of necessity. If you're not familiar with what those mean in a legal context, here's the short version. Self-defense means a defense may argue Davis acted to protect himself from an immediate threat. Compulsion generally means a defendant claims they were forced or coerced into committing an act, often under threat to their own safety. And necessity means a defense may argue that Davis's actions, however extreme, were meant to prevent some greater harm. Think about what that means for a case that's been publicly described as a targeted mass shooting from day one. Investigators, prosecutors, and news coverage, including our own earlier video on this case, framed this as a calculated, planned attack against a family. Filing notices for self-defense, compulsion, and necessity suggest Davis's legal team may be preparing to argue something very different in court. That he wasn't simply the aggressor in this story, but that he was somehow acting under pressure, fear, or coercion. Now, to be clear, filing a notice doesn't mean a defense will actually go anywhere in court. Prosecutors have laid out a case built around 5 counts of first-degree murder, 2 survivors who were shot, and a body that was allegedly dismembered and discarded in a dumpster. That's an enormous amount of evidence for any defense to work around. But the fact that this notice was filed at all tells you this case is about to get a lot more complicated than 2 teenagers targeted a family. So where does that leave WT? The 15-year-old? Is she going to face the same defense strategy? Is there a chance the courts view her role differently than Davis's, given her age and her direct family relationship to the victims? And what does it mean that she allegedly didn't just participate? She allegedly used 2 different methods, a gun and a knife, on her own aunt. Those are the questions this case is going to keep raising as it moves through court. And there's one more piece we haven't covered yet: the reaction from what's left of this family, and a community coming together in a way that says a lot about what East St. Louis has been through this week. Let's talk about what's happened in the community since these charges came down, because it says a lot about what East St. Louis has been carrying this week. On Wednesday, the House of Prayer to All Nations Church, the same church where 3 of the 5 victims worshiped, held a community service of prayer. Think about what that means for a congregation. 3 empty seats or more in pews where these people used to sit every week. A pastor leading a room full of grieving neighbors, trying to find words for something defenseless. This wasn't just a family's loss. It was a congregation's loss, a neighborhood's loss. One family friend, a pastor named Mary Young, who says she personally knows everyone involved in this case, spoke publicly about what she understood of the relationship between the 2 teenage suspects. According to her, Davis and WT were in a relationship, and part of the conflict leading up to all of this involved Davis being put out of his own home. According to Young, WT wanted her family to let him stay with them, and when that didn't happen, the situation escalated. He had gotten put out, and she wanted them to let him stay with them or whatever, but now they can't be together. Young said, only one day, maybe one day, when they go to court. That last line is worth sitting with. Only one day. Maybe. Will these 2 even be in the same room again? And it'll be in a courtroom, not as a couple, but as co-defendants in the murder of the girl's own family. Now here's something that hasn't been fully addressed publicly yet, and it's a detail we're going to keep tracking as this case develops. The charge against Davis for dismembering a human body. Authorities haven't released specifics on which victim this involves or the full circumstances, but given that Sherry May was found inside a storage tote in a dumpster, it's reasonable to assume this charge connects to how her body was concealed. We don't have confirmation of exactly what happened, and we're not going to speculate beyond what's been confirmed in court. But it's a detail that adds a level of premeditation and concealment that goes far beyond the impression most people had of this case just days ago. And that's really the through line of this entire update. What the public was first told was a sudden, single-day mass shooting has turned out to be something that unfolded over more than a week, involving planning, concealment, and now a legal defense strategy that could argue Davis wasn't simply an aggressor, but someone acting under compulsion or necessity. Marcus May, the father who lost his mother, sister, and nephew in this case, and who is also the father of the 15-year-old suspect, has continued to speak publicly since our last video. His words haven't softened. He's made it clear he doesn't believe there's an excuse for what happened, regardless of what any legal defense may argue in court. For a man in his position, grieving 3 family members while his own daughter faces murder charges for their deaths, there's no version of this that gets easier as more details come out. If anything, learning that his sister Sherry may have been killed days earlier, then hidden in a dumpster, only adds another layer of pain to a loss that was already almost impossible to process. So here's where this case stands right now. One suspect, formally charged as an adult, facing 12 counts including murder, attempted murder, and dismembering a human body. A second suspect, 15 years old, facing juvenile charges that prosecutors are actively trying to move into adult court. A timeline that stretches back over a week. Started with a woman found in a storage tote, and ending with a sequence of shootings across 3 locations that captured national attention. And now, a defense strategy that could reshape how this entire case is understood by the time it reaches trial. This is far from over. There will be more hearings, more evidence revealed, and eventually, a decision on whether WT is tried as a juvenile or as an adult, right alongside the boyfriend she's accused of killing her family with. What do you think that self-defense and compulsion strategy is going to look like in court? And now that we know this started days before anyone realized, do you think the full story is still being pieced together, or is there more here that hasn't come out yet? Let me know in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed, because the moment new developments come out in this case, we'll be right back with another update